Thank you very much for that sensible introduction. We've got a session which is, if I were to read the title of the session, it says Virtual Benefits Measuring the Impact and ROI of Virtual Learning. And when you really think of learning, whether it is physical learning or whether it's virtual learning, I don't think learning changes because of the fact that it's been virtualized. It's changed in the form it is delivered, but there are several nuances around it that we need to really understand. And what I'd like to do over the course of the next maybe hour or so, because this session goes on till about 6 o'clock in the evening. So what I'll do is I'll spend maybe about 5 to 10 minutes introducing the subject as well as introducing the panelists. Then post that, I will pose a set of questions that we would like to deliberate on amongst the panel, and we hopefully cover that in about 40 odd minutes. And then after that, we will, in a way, like you might normally do in a panel discussion, throw open the floor to questions from the audience. So that's the larger plan around all of this. But first, let me just dwell on the subject of learning and kind of reflect on what exactly does learning mean for all of us. So when we think of learning, think of it from the perspective of what is learning? Learning for a lot of us is a continuous process. It is not something that starts on day one, ends on day 5. It's not something that starts in kindergarten and ends when you finish the final term of your professional degree. But its learning is a continuous process. And especially for those of us who head the learning function or head the human resource function within an organization, when you think about it, what you do realize is that as soon as a new person, a new employee joins the organization, the first bit of learning is that they have to learn about the organization. They have to learn where did they start, where is it going, what is its vision, what are the values that this organization has, several things which allows them to be able to define the context in which they have to work. Learning, they have to learn their jobs, because unless they know what they are supposed to do, how are you going to hold them responsible tomorrow for what they were supposed to do? They have to learn sometimes their skills, because they might be a new hire into the organization at a lateral level, coming in with certain skills and experience, but then having to learn new skills to be able to do the new role that they're going to play in a new organization. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that they might be moving into a new role. And if they move into a new role, then they have to learn new skills in order to be able to perform that particular role. And in many cases, we know that as they progress within an organization, grow from, let's say, largely job-related skills at the bottom end and start moving upwards in terms of leadership, then there are a lot of life skills that they need to actually figure out what they have to, understand and grow. Team management, managing conflict, being able to delegate, skills that typically you wouldn't get when you do a job, but then these are life skills that you have to have, understanding of in case you were to do. So learning in several ways is a completely continuous process. The second part of it is that learning is adaptable. Learning has to take into account the changing situations which are there in an organization. I spend time with startups, and what I'm seeing with them is that a startup organization in its initial growth phase versus a startup organization which is reaching some level of stability. And in a startup, stability means that you're growing from 50% per year to 25% a year. And so it's a very relative term when you talk about it from stability. But a startup organization which is in a relatively more stable phase requires a very different learning process, requires the people within to also learn new skills to be able to handle this kind of an organization. And then we all saw that, during the pandemic, we were all forced to reflect on our own organizations and then try and understand how to be able to manage these organizations in order to be able to keep them afloat. Hard decisions had to be taken, costs had to be reduced, new processes had to be invented. The lockdown forced us into decentralized working. There was a certain sense of agility and purpose which had to be infused amongst the people in the organization. So what happens is that there is a different set of skills which are required when you want to think about, let's say, managing a difficult situation like a lockdown. Even when you think of it from entry level to mid-management level to senior level, learning has to adapt to the capabilities and the skill sets of people who occupy these levels of management. To a task, if you're a growth organization, if you are actually moving in laterally within, from one role to another role within the organization, if you're growing from one role to another role within the organization, if you're being inducted into the organization, if you're going to be leading a new division, learning then has to adapt to the changing requirements which are there. And then, of course, at the end of it, all learning has to have a purpose. And when you think of it from a purposeful perspective, think of it from the alignment that you need to create between the individual and the organization. Think about it from the knowledge that you need to infuse within an individual and consequently his or her output, which needs to be able to build the organizational capability which is there. Think about it from the skill sets that you want to inculcate in an individual and those skill sets and how they begin to play in the human interactions that that particular manager or leader will have. So learning has to be adaptable for different situations, for different levels of people, and for different purposes. At the end of it, we all know the challenges that we have in being able to get more and more money for our learning budgets. So hence learning invariably is under the scanner when it comes to being measurable. People want to know very clearly what is it going to be delivering in terms of an output. What is it going to create in terms of alignment between an individual performance and an organization's performance. People want to know what are the inputs that you'd like to provide. And typically, when you look at learning, everybody focuses on the input, and there is less focus on the output because output is often a little more fuzzier. And certainly, when you think of it from the perspective of, let's say, organizational output versus individual output, it gets even more fuzzier. So I sit on the board of an educational chain which has more than 1,000 odd schools, preschools and K to 12 schools. And one of the things that we've seen is that when transitioning from physical classroom-led training and education to virtual learning, it was a huge change that we had to make. And what we knew is that we were actually providing outcomes in terms of teaching. We were finding it difficult to be able to measure outcomes in terms of learning because you can standardize input. But what we know is that this input is going to be provided to an individual, and every individual is different. And consequently, their interest, their understanding, all of that tends to be also very different. And the way they absorb, the way they learn, the way they internalize can be also very different. So learning has to be measurable for us to be able to figure out, is it working or not working? And similarly, it should have a feedback loop. Because if it doesn't have a feedback loop, you won't know where are you going to be able to make the corrections. We had earlier Mr. Bhaktiyar talk about the fact that learning has to be optional. And that is something that we should all remember because it's got to be self-driven. The person who's learning has to be able to understand what of this should I absorb for myself? what of this should I actually supplement what I already have? It should be driven by a passion that that individual has for being able to better himself or herself in whatever role that they are playing. And then there has to be a desire to adopt what they have learned and finally translate that into execution. And I think when you think about the way he said it, and when you have large decentralized organizations with high attrition levels, it is important for us to be able to figure out how do we decentralize learning, how do we make it optional as opposed to centralized and compulsory. So are we saying goodbye to terms like X number of days in terms of training every year? And are we going to now transition to Y number of days of learning every year? That's a large question that we need to ask. And in all of this, in the new environment, how do we see it from a virtual learning perspective? How do we decide how much to invest? How do we determine what the impact is? And finally, at the end of it, how do we figure out what is the return on this investment that we will be making? To deliberate on this and many more such issues around it, what I have with me is this panel, as you go defined, of 6 lovely ladies. Mukta Nakra, who is the head of HR of Marks and Spencer Reliance India Private Limited. Most of you all will know it as M&S in India. Neelam Ahluwalia, who is the Vice President, Learning and Development of Bigbasket. Nandini Mehta, Head of HR, Lifestyle International. Nivedita Nanda, who is the Chief Human Resource Officer of Kaya Ltd. If you have any problem with your skin, whether it's cure or care, Kaya will take care of you. Eva Lorge, who's the Country Talent Development Head of IKEA India. And then last but not the least, Kriti Jain, who's the Associate Director of Human Capital at Myntra. What I'd like to do with these 6 ladies is to be able to pose a set of questions to them, to be able to throw some light on some of the issues around this topic. So let me first start with maybe Eva. And Eva, what I'd like to pose to you, and this question can then get fielded to anybody else also within this panel. When we think of learning, we often think of learning as the responsibility of the learning and development organization. And when we think of learning, it tends to bring to us a certain onerous task that we are all entrusted with. How do we translate learning into value? How do we look at it from the perspective of delivering knowledge to the individual, of providing that individual with the skill sets to be able to apply this knowledge in her or his job, to be able to create skill sets for themselves, and finally to be able to create that passion to excel in their job through continuous learning. So I would like you, Eva, to just kickstart this whole discussion by talking about, what are your views on creating value out of the learning function?
Good evening and namaskar. Thank you very much for having me here. It was not an easy question to start with. I think inspired by what you said before, at IKEA we see learning on a holistic approach. It's about, of course, competence, but it's also about motivation and actually capabilities. And it starts with the willingness to grow. When we are in the recruitment process, we talk about this, that we also have a saying that when you grow, IKEA grows. So when we recruit for a long-term relationship, not at the same position, but for you to be able to grow within the company, and with that also develop IKEA for the future. So I think it's a lot about the motivation and to find the right candidate for the right position at the right time. So it's a lot about getting to know each other, but also to understand what is your passion, what is it that you really want to do within the company.
Good, thank you. And Mukta, would you like to just add to it from the M&S perspective?
Sure. I think, I truly kind of align with what Eva said, right? How do you drive a culture? I think it has to be integrated in the way we expect people to build careers. And of course, it starts from the point that, an incumbent becomes a candidate and joins the organization. So the moment you communicate this in a manner that you own your own career in your own hands, you tend to be more accountable and take that ownership. Because, to your point, Bijou, that you were making earlier, right? How do you can't enforce learning. And learning has to become just the way you cited the example. I think in the previous session, someone cited the example of it's like going to the gym, right? Every single day you need to go to the gym. So how do you build a culture around that, I think is a huge question for all of us to deliberate. And I think over the last many months, the availability of learning at fingertips is only helping us strive in this direction forward. There's just so much content that got created. People had to learn new ways of working. So I think in collective effort of building that environment and culture, where you strive by learning new things, and it could come through experience, exposure, through videos, through what you read. There are various ways in which you inculcate that behavior. But even as leaders, when we inculcate that in our language to say, here's something I learned and I'm sharing that with you, you're just continuously reinforcing that culture itself to say, learn something new, think of a new idea and share it with people. So just a perspective.
Nivedita, I think yesterday we had some discussion around this, saying that how did you manage to pivot the organization from having learned to do things in a certain way to learning to do things differently?
Yeah, I think, Bijou, it's a very important thing to talk about it today's pandemic time. At Kaya, I will just take one step behind what Eva said. We are creating a culture and creating an environment where actually the motivation of the employees are growing because of the learning culture. I think one satisfied employee will bring a satisfied customer, right? That's what retail industry is all about. From there, if I take on what we're discussing yesterday, we were very clear that how to survive in the pandemic, and the capability building was the major thing we came up. Okay, our stores, our clinics were closed March, April. The only thing what you said, how to manage the cost, how to survive was the only target for us, wherein it gave us an opportunity to rethink our business. When you talk about rethinking about a business, capability comes first thing. The training department will call and see, this is what the business we are talking about, how you guys are going to cope up. So my training team actually really worked very hard during this pandemic. So we decided, when we're rethinking, what can we do immediately to survive? So we have a product line, right? And Kaya has almost 85 products. We said, let's just, talk to our loyal customers. So immediately we said, let's have something on loyalty program, okay? And the product sales, how we really build the capability of our people to understand our products and how do they sell products through online, to speaking to the loyal customers, and also how we really bring in the customers saying that, yes, when we open, we are going to be COVID compliant. There are a lot of safety precautions we are taking. The training department played a major role. So these three things, when we are saying that the training department became very important, that point, of course, they're always, because our business is based on technology. So they play a very important role. But definitely, the pandemic really taught us to think of a different business line, which we did. We launched Training Academy during the Kaya Training Academy during the pandemic. We have a huge CSR thought process came in. how we can, really build skill set for Indian women who can just, work anywhere. But just coming back to the business, we had very clear, actually, the KRA set for people. One, if we are doing a capability building, we are spending so much, we invested on technology, what is that we are bringing in? And that's what today's session, right? How do we bring in ROI? The first thing was the product sales. Are we really growing our product, which we did? Second, we said, our loyal customers, are they coming back to us? Actually, today, when I'm sitting today, we did a fabulous December. We did a fabulous, January and February also, we got our target back. That's the best thing I realized. So the KRAs were very clear for the learning department, also the entire organization where HR worked with the, so capability building, creating the right KRAs for people. I think that, made us really coming back to the business. Today, if we are saying we have hit our last year's target, I think only because of this team which worked relentlessly to, get the people back on track.
Thanks, Nivedita. Nandini, this is, there is often this, I think we're having an echo. Is there a problem with is an echo? Can you hear us? Can you hear me? It seems fine now.
Yes.
Nandini, this question is largely, related to what you might define as defining learning outcomes, which, as I was mentioning about my school example earlier, is in terms of defining for ourselves that here is an individual who's got, let's say, a certain skill set and got a certain capability. And we are trying to provide to that individual certain inputs in the form of learning, customized to his or her requirements. And consequently, we are hoping that they will graduate from this set of skill set to another set of skill sets, and also in terms of capabilities. One of the biggest challenges that the learning industry faces is that how are we sure? One, and the second is, how do we measure these outcomes? So it might be useful if you could just throw some light on this, because if we can crack this and if we can find an answer for this, then our ability to be able to justify our learning budgets internally and to create the link between, let's say, sales and organizational performance and learning and organizational performance in the similar vein can also become a lot stronger. So it'll help if you could kickstart this discussion. I can then move it after that to both Neelam and Kriti for their views also.
So, Bijou, I think it's an all-encompassing question that you asked me. So I'll try to answer it as crisply as possible. So I'll take a discussion from where Nivedita, Eva, and Mukta started off. So I think learning in an organization can be successful if it is incorporated into the business. So I think the moment we have training as a separate function driving its own agenda, it's never going to be successful. And I think that very directly relates to the outcome as well. So the way I look at it is, how do we partner with the business, understand what are some of the business critical, outcomes that we are looking at as an organization, and then align our training interventions accordingly. So if I was to give you some examples, let me take the example of lifestyle. We do a survey every month. The marketing team does a survey, and of course everybody would know that, and it's the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, right? So there are a lot of elements in the Net Promoter Score. One of it being how was the service in the store? How did the staff attend to you in the store? And there are quite a few questions around it. So can the training function have an intervention around that, so that our Net Promoter Score, at least on the service parameter, goes up? Because that is where we can actually do something along with the business to improve the scores. The rest is more on product pricing, which doesn't directly come to to an outcome of training, right? So I'm just giving you one example. The other example I can give you is during COVID, most of the retailers have tried a lot of new initiatives, and so did lifestyle. we did something called, like I was mentioning yesterday, VSA, which is a virtual sales assistant, where we show products to the customer over a WhatsApp, and then we explain the products. We interact with the customers and we try and sell. And we've done wonderfully well on that intervention only because the training function partnered with business and actually trained the staff how to communicate with the customer. What should they talk about in terms of the product? So I think that really helped us boost our sale at a time when retail was really, suffering in terms of, getting sales during the COVID period, right? So I'm just giving you two small examples, but there's a lot more. And I think if you're able to incorporate the entire training piece into the business, ensure it becomes a part of the KPIs of every individual, every manager, I think we will definitely be able to see outcomes. And the way I look at it is today, most of the time we are talking about competencies, skill gaps, skill development, but this is something which is not really measurable. Right? It takes a long time for a person to change the way he or she is tuned to doing something. And it's not like the person working is a child, not that that is the only thing that they're doing. They're spending 8 to 10 hours delivering on whatever is required of them in their role. And we're asking them to, learn beyond those 8 to 10 hours. So it's not going to be easy. So can we inculcate the entire training journey into that 8 to 10 hours is what we should look at if we are looking at a outcome in terms of delivering results with respect to training. So this is how I would look at it. I'm not sure if I've been able to answer this well, but I think that's the only success that.
So I think the point you're making is that, and I think it also goes back to one of the previous sessions this afternoon, where somebody said, who should learning report to? And I think that brought to fore a larger question as to the learning requirement of employees in the organization, which is aligned to the business interests of the organization. Is it a business function or is it a central function like HR? And I think what you're saying is that it cannot be just a HR function. It cannot be just a business function. It's an organizational requirement, and hence it becomes an organizational responsibility. There will be some people who will drive it. There will be some people who will support it, and there will be some people who will do it. But at the end of the day, I think as Eva said, when you grow, IKEA grows. In a sense, that is what it is. Finally, at the end of the day, let me just bring the same question to Kriti and to Neelam, in the context of the fact that both of you all had to scramble to adapt to the changing constraints when the COVID-induced lockdowns were announced in two different manners. In the case of Neelam, Bigbasket had to step up the act and truly become the life savior to several households just because they couldn't go out of their homes, nor could they shop. And in your case, Kriti, what happened was that while you didn't immediately have to start supplying fashion to people, but as and when you began to start supplying, you realized that your entire fulfillment mechanism collapsed, largely because the people who were supposed to work with you had all gone back to wherever they came from, and thereby you had to pick up the threads literally from scratch. So when you think of, these kind of changes to the business processes at the time when, pandemic induced and post lockdown, when you opened up, then how did you manage in terms of actually the same question that I asked, what are some of the learning processes and how did you adapt and adopt it for these changes which were there in the environment? So Neelam, if you could start, that would be useful. And then we can go on to you, Kriti.
Thanks for that question, Bijou. I think I completely agree with what Nandita said, that learning has to be aligned with the business. There's one thing that I completely believe in also, that if you can't measure, you will not be able to manage, right? So business usually measures and manages it like that. And when they have a problem or when they want to change something, I think the only, and at least at Bigbasket, I've seen this and I believe this, that when they want to induce something, the trust that they have on the L&D, that this is where we will need to give it to them, and they'll be able to ensure that whatever medium they use, whether it is digital, whether it is a huddle mechanism, or it is some other platform, they'll be able to do it much faster, even if I give it to my operations, right? Because I think there's certain capability that L&D brings in. At that point of time, when I think that the only question that everybody posed and thought about was that there are customers waiting outside, and I don't have the people to do what they're supposed to do and deliver. And hence there is a gap. I don't think none of us thought beyond that. All right. So the only thought that we had is that if we have people, what is the minimum way in which I'll be able to ensure that three things, which is part of our value, which means customer service has to be good, maniacal focus on ensuring quality is very high, and ensuring that timely delivery is done. These are the only things that we thought we will be able to teach them in whatever 30 minutes, 40 minutes that I get, right? At the same time, also looking what is the kind of business, what is the kind of people that business will get. And I will have to very quickly adapt to it. So I can't do a RAG analysis and go back to them. I am rejecting 10 candidates because I don't think they are up to the mark. I don't think I had the privilege to say that at that point of time. So adapting, I think it's a survival skill that came. The mammalian brains immediately comes into action. And the only thing that you think about at that point of time is that let me do it quickly, let me do it nicely, and let me ensure that I know my audience well. So one of the things that we did was asking HR, what kind of people are you getting? What are companies that we are interacting with? Whom are we meeting? If we get a little knowledge about that, we'll be able to build a module around it. And that's exactly what we did. Having said that, Bijou, I also think that even pre-COVID, not in this manner, but that's how L&D should be, and that's how I think L&D will survive. Partnering with the business. What is giving you sleepless nights? What is that makes your business more successful? And I'll align myself to you, right? You can have cherry on the cake, but then you need to have a cake first. So I'll put the cake first, and then obviously all training that I think will build capability, will be able to build more skill, will bring in more smiles, will bring in more, and will be added. But I'll be at least able to bake a cake for you. So that's what I think we should be doing, and that's what I think we have been doing at Bigbasket. And I'm very glad that there is definitely a place at the table for us.
Thank you. Thanks, Neelam. And Kriti, would you like to just share a few experiences of yours on this?
Absolutely. So, Bijou, I think taking forward what Neelam and Nandini said, right? Even, I truly believe that it's very important to have the buy-in from our business stakeholders in order to be able to drive the real change, right? Otherwise, it is always about, hey, we are doing these skill development interventions. We want our people to be trained on a certain factor, but they are not turning up for workshops. I think that's something which we've always struggled with, right? But what worked for us is, and like you rightly said, for us, suddenly business came to a standstill overnight. And our business leaders said that here is the time where, as a human capital or as a learning or an engagement function, we let our employees know that we are there. We are there to support them. We are there to make them ready as in when the business will open up, right? So I got a lot of asks from my business leaders that over the last year, these are the 3-4 priorities which I've had from a skill building standpoint, and all of those have been accelerated because of the pandemic. And now you have all of this time on your hands. Let's make the best use of it. Let's make sure that we are able to give a very good learning experience to our employees and make them ready for when the business opens, right? And as soon as the pandemic hit, we were all in, of course, in different stages of the digital learning journey, right? And this only accelerated everything. There were a lot of places where we had great programs, but we didn't know how to run them virtually. So what we did is we, for the first couple of weeks, we did a lot of focus on self-learning. So we told people that, we've already have our training needs identified. We know these are the topics we want to work on. Why don't we take this time to introspect? And we made it very interesting. We rolled out a lot of gamified learning. So there were these games that we ran. We kind of made it into a championship. We made it interesting so that people wanted to kind of learn more. They wanted to get engaged with the learning platforms, and we made them very familiar to the way of virtual learning. After that, we used that time to quickly transition our learning modules, our content into really interesting bite-sized content and make it more contextual. And then we kind of picked it up from there. One of the very important things which we picked up and which our business asked us to do was to build manager capability, because they said that, look, we are an organization who's never operated remotely. We don't know how to do that. Our managers don't know how to get the team together. And in this sort of an environment, there's a lot of uncertainty, anxiety. How do I make sure that my managers are able to sail through the year, right? And they said, we need to make sure our managers are ready. We need to make sure our managers are ready to face any challenges that come their way. And therefore, building their capability is very important. So because we had a lot of buy-in, I was able to, along with our business leaders, we were able to quickly turn around workshops for our managers. And I'm so happy to say that all of them were facilitated by my business leaders. They said that we are going to put our hands up. We will make sure that our managers learn the things that we need to. We need you to help us deliver the right messages and right content. And that worked beautiful for us. If I talk about the impact, I think all of our employees have come back and said that no external training on a topic can deliver the message of what my leader is delivering to me, right? If my leader is walking the talk, my leader is sharing experiences, my leader is sharing their failures, and I learn from that. So I think that business buying and their support really helped us accelerate a lot of these learnings. They came to the front end and said, let's do this together, let's learn, let's brainstorm. And I think that helped us beautifully navigate the whole pandemic storm. And as soon as we were up for business, we were ready, we were excited, we were energized, and we were able to kind of pick up our business as soon as the government regulations allowed.
Thanks, Kriti. You've raised a point, Kriti, about how to adapt learning to that virtual environment. And I'm reminded of an experience that I had on another company board that I sit, which is a technology company, an IT company, which has got some 24,000 employees, spread across 7 different offices. And when lockdown was announced, the first thing that they had to do was to make sure that they picked the equipment that, what do employees do in an IT company? They all come from wherever they are. And the company transports them, brings them to an office. They all sit in front of either laptops or desktops. And there are specific tasks that they have to perform. And these are divided into groups, and then groups coalesce into projects. So all that the company did was just take each of these individuals, literally thinking about them, and say that, what you are doing in the office, do in your homes. If your laptops are in the office, we will take your laptop and give it back to you in your house. If in the office you had physical connectivity, what we will encourage you to do is to be able to get the same connectivity in your homes. Then they had to do some endpoint security systems to ensure that, all these connectivity norms were secure enough for them to work from their homes. But the transition and the challenges of transitioning work from an office to work from home was relatively simple. And within a week, they had almost everybody except 50 people out of 24,000 working, and over time at productivity levels which even exceeded what they do when they come into an office, which was quite surprising. So when you think of it from, let's say, a retail organization, and I've often looked at that and said that what happens in a retail organization? On the one hand, we have, let's say, entry levels, people who are joining the organization mostly in roles at the store, for whom the training or the learning is actually done in a physical room, sometimes in the store, sometimes in the city where the store is located, done, using PowerPoint presentations, sometimes conversation, role play, LCD projectors, physical interaction. correction, guidance, observation. And when you think of virtual learning, you suddenly realize that, first of all, content is centralized. Content is got to be digitally streamed to the individual. Connectivity can be a challenge as opposed to being in a room. The devices on which the content is viewed can vary from hopefully a small smartphone to sometimes, if they are lucky, they might have a laptop. Somebody's in the house. Okay, given that skill set and typically the socioeconomic background that these kind of people come in from. So to be able to transition learning from this physical environment to a virtual learning system requires a lot of changes. Requires changes in not just the learner's mindset, but also requires changes from the trainer's mindset. Requires changes in terms of the way we will connect content, people, and the delivery of this content. So how do you go about some of these things? Because it's easy to think of it in one perspective. It's difficult to suddenly say I will move from physical to digital. And I think I'd like to use the point that you raised and pose this question to Mukta, because I'm sure that having people in stores, and Eva, you're also in a similar situation. We have huge numbers of people in stores. Then how do you actually make sure that A, when the store is closed, you keep them engaged, B, when the store is open, that you keep them actively involved, C, how do you connect them with customers who are not even coming into stores, with the staff who are in the store? So if you could just shed some light on some of these aspects.
Sure, sure, Bijou. I mean, I think last few months have really taught us how to transition from that physical environment of learning to the virtual environment. And absolutely on point to say it's a combination of content, the learner's ability to be able to focus, as well as how are the trainers going to effectively engage with this population, right? So, reflecting on our own journey, I think one of the things that beautifully came out of our conversations with business leaders were the goals that they wanted to set in the short term, as we quickly needed to transition to virtual learning. So, virtually looking at what is it that we wanted to do was primarily to keep that frontline population engaged more than anything else. They had 8 to 10 hours available with them that otherwise they would spend on the shop floor, that they didn't know what to do about. And of course, initially on, there was a lot of anxiety with what was happening, of the unknown, what was coming, what was going to happen, are we secured, are we safe, both in terms of well-being as well as from a commercial standpoint with our jobs. So keeping some of those aspects in mind, I think we quickly transitioned to creating topics that were relevant to our population at that point in time, because content has to be palatable from a standpoint, what is it relevant for me, and what is the mind space that I will be able to give to it when I'm going through it. So in working with the leaders as well as SMEs that came up from the business side, the need was for us to quickly create that content that was going to be relevant and bite-sized. I think Kriti also mentioned that it had to be bite-sized, and that's what they created for their people managers as well. Because, you can't run a one-day-long session in a virtual environment. There is fatigue that sets in after a point in time. Connections are an issue. Data connectivity is a continuous challenge, and we know that. So transitioning through some of these operational challenges to building that right level of content, the right time of the content, and then, also linking it to some of the learning objectives, I think was key. And then seeking feedback to say, what do you think is working well? What topics do you think will interest you that we should bring to you? And to ensure that they remain connected to that learning, just ensuring that it connects with their career plans as well in terms of what their PDPs, look like. So combination of those efforts to build that interest was important. And thankfully for us, we had our online platform, both from an HR standpoint as well as learning standpoint. I think for organizations that didn't have them as well, quickly had to bring those things. So we didn't have to go through a journey of making people learn a new system. But interestingly, when they saw everyone else adapt around them as well to digital, whether it was kids that were studying online, whether it was other people who were working online. I think everyone adapted to the new way of working. So learning online also became one of the new things and skills that you had to adapt to be able to move on. And then I think the transition of journey from a content standpoint, from just interest related engagement stuff, we put newspapers to read, we put cartoon strips, we put various fun things to do as well, to then moving to a journey of starting to reskill people. Where is it that we were going to need people to think about new skills when we were opening stores, to now getting to a point of upskilling them for newer competencies that are going to be important in the store environment. It has to remain connected to that incumbent's journey of learning. I think that's been an instrumental learning for all of us, at M&S, to say, keep your learning journey aligned to the learning goals of the business and making it interesting for the people. More than anything else, I think people will get used to it and acclimatize and continue to hear feedback from them. What would they like? How would they like? And what is it that we can do more of? But simulation, role plays, sharing experiences, I think all of this collectively became an integral part of that content that had to be very aptly sized in terms of timing, etc., to launch for people.
Thanks, Mukta. And Eva, if you could just reflect on what you all did at IKEA.
Yes, as I shared yesterday, that being one of the smallest market in IKEA, with a big growth plan, of course, but with our 1,700 co-workers, we really saw the engagement, and also, as you said, with quite a lot of different prerequisites from our heroes in the stores on smartphones or mobile phones. We actually, with those numbers of co-workers, we actually achieved 85,000 learning hours. So on this period of 4 or 5 months, that is actually 54 hours per co-worker. So I think also that opportunity of the ambition that all our co-workers shared, that they are so eager to learn, they really want to develop, and with that as a base, I think the change that we have talked about quite many years and not really been able to move, that transition now happened. The change happened in a couple of months. My team had 2 weeks to prepare the online sessions, learning sessions, and we took the content and of course with support from our global matrix, and then turn it into learning sessions. And I think the fantastic thing about this is that we actually could reach more people instead of having face-to-face classroom sessions or on the floor sessions. So now we could open up for the many co-workers, and the numbers shows that was a huge success actually.
Great. Are you seeing between, both of you all talked about and everybody spoke about the fact that we've got to virtualize content. Are you seeing, let's say, examples of things like gamification, interactivity, simulation, those kind of techniques which are now getting applied to content in order to be able to create a more natural learning process? And in Mukta, you could start off and then the others could also add to the same.
There is, of course, a natural learning process, and the evolution also happens. And I think we're all going through one right now as well, right? So, like a trainer's ability to be able to engage an audience in this environment. I mean, I think even an event of this kind, isn't that an example of evolution of learning, right? How we would put ourselves in a room for 2 days, discuss these topics on a big stage, to doing it like this, right? So the evolution is continuous, I think. And we all have to be agile and quickly adapt to what are some of these new things that are kind of coming up. So I think from a future standpoint, again, measurement is important. To what end are we doing all of this, right? Here also we're sharing knowledge, we're sharing best practices, but to what end is it that we're going to directionally take some of these things is going to continue to evolve as we evolve the future of learning. And there is so much more that's happening. So for example, when you put learning at fingertips, you create an environment where I think of a topic and I have Google to learn about it, right? You don't necessarily depend on just the content that is available through an organization. So just integrating various ways of learning into that future is an important aspect from a standpoint of just shaping it. And the learning behaviors, how are they evolving, and what effort can an organization make to start rewarding some of those behaviors? I think that is going to be an important fundamental shift as well, to say, if someone's learning in a certain manner, can we give more of that platform or that opportunity, etc. And then how do you make experience come to life from that learning? So I think there's a lot that will evolve in this space from a standpoint of the future, and I think it's a space to watch out for. All of us will collectively shape it. The technology is also evolving very, very quickly in this. There is AI-driven analytics that one can look at now that overlay, sits on top of a person's behavior of how they're learning, what topics are they engaging in, that can give us insights to say what is it that people are learning about, and can we create more content around it? Can we create opportunities in a different manner around it? Can we create projects in that space for people to get experiential way of learning into that, and also kind of target it across different levels as well from a long-term standpoint.
And Nivedita, if you could just add to what Mukta just mentioned.
Yeah, so I think to answer to your question, what you asked, are we going through gamification, creating a platform? Kaya, we had a LMS, not LMS, we had a platform where we used to put a lot of content on for our front line. But we realized that we need to reinvent or rethink or reimagine the way we are posting our content for our people on a platform. Okay, so I had a lot of plans for 2020, but again, I'll be very practical and honest here, wherein we didn't spend, anything on the platform because I didn't want to invest immediately, so that we just to think about the bottom line. That's what we always look at. I kept telling you that I had to manage the employees first and their salaries, so I really didn't go for any gamification. But what we taught our people is how to use social media, how to use WhatsApp videos, how to, frontline. In fact, one of our program with 3 months extensive program we did on products, I keep telling you that's we created some product champs. Because we thought if all over India, I can have this 20 to 25 people go and speak about how to do the product selling, and it will definitely have an impact on the top line. So what we did is we asked people to post videos so that we had a lot of competitions, to create that engagement. So we didn't invest on anything gamification and all, but that's going to be the future, Bijou, because learning is going to be, I think from now onwards, the training department has changed their thought how to train people. That all of us agree. But I think reinventing your training, methods are important. I think which we learned during this pandemic. With a limited investment, how training department, limited budget, how training department can come out and saying that, yes, we are going to be partnering with the business and thinking about growing the top line, managing the bottom line, without an investment, but definitely we want to build the capability of people to be ready when we are back to the business. So our training department, rethought or reimagined the training content. They actually had a lot of interactive training programs, a lot of videos they asked people to upload. They said, okay, you do it instead of we doing it. Our employees started uploading their. You'll be surprised the kind of videos they created. Because that time they were at home and they said, something to do, for them. We have a lot of services, right? They started talking about how customer satisfaction is important. Because that's what our business is all about, services and product. How we can do, our doctors. One more interesting thing happened actually, I must tell you. So we, started web consulting. Actually, a lot of customers said we are not able to go to the clinic. Can we have web consult? Our doctors, where I hope some in our audience, some doctors are there or not, I don't know. But, they are, I'll say, very technology savvy when it comes to instruments. When it comes to laptop or, using a, mobile, they're actually, they're challenged. I'm sorry to say. So we have to train them how to educate customers. So the training went to that extent, educating the customers, educating the employees, and you will be very happy to know there's a different business line we have created is web consulting. We have signed up with partners. I think we survived that pandemic through that. We created a different business line. Our doctors were trained how to talk to the customers. I think that was very important for us. So the learning Bijou has changed the learning way, the way we are going to teach people, or the departments are rethinking their way. I think that's important to come out of the conventional side and think of technology. That's the future. That's what pandemic taught us, I must.
Okay, great. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was the fact, I was just mentioning to you earlier about this IT company, and what they have is something which is called Yorbit. It's YORBIT. So what happens in Yorbit is that there's a lot of content which is available on Yorbit. There are self-learning courses which are there. There is Harvard mentor programs which are there available online, etc., etc. And then employees can actually log in and learn things at their own pace, learn things that interest them, decide as to into which level of learning that they want to go to, and do a lot of these things. Now, what Yorbit does at the back end is exactly what Mukta was mentioning earlier, which is it actually keeps, understanding which employees logged into which particular programs, spent time, got certified, learned from their own, how far away from their own skill sets are these, etc. And then based on a compilation of a lot of this, it then started determining which would be the appropriate set of people and matching the project that the company gets with the capability of the individual as defined by the department, plus the aptitude and passion of the individual as determined from Yorbit logins. So that's the way they actually kind of manage to interface between the two. And when you go back to AI, they manage to actually create custom tools to be able to understand at the end of the day how to be able to figure out the best match. But here you're talking about individuals who are typically graduates, if not postgraduates. Whereas what happens in the case of a lot of us in the retail industry is that we get 10 standard pass, 12 standard pass, fail, at the most sometimes a graduate, which is sometimes a rarity. So how do we think of, let's say, being able to do the things, like children today in schools have taken to virtual learning like a duck takes to water, because for them, everything else in their life was virtual except for learning, which they had to go to a school and sit in a classroom. Otherwise, they were sitting on screens all the time. Now, suddenly they got an opportunity to even study sitting in a screen. So they actually took to it like a duck to water. It wasn't difficult. When we told people that, cinemas are closed, please watch Netflix in your homes, nobody had a challenge. They just transitioned so beautifully into it. When we told people you can't go to a store, shop online, everybody said, yeah, perfectly all right. It's not an alien concept for us. But when we think of, let's say, a retail community and the retail staff that we have, one, the socioeconomic backgrounds that they come from, the educational backgrounds that they come from, sometimes even just the mindsets that they have, how easy or difficult do you think it will be for us to be able to transition them to this new form of learning, if we were to think of this as being, say, the learning for the future? And maybe Nandini, you could just kickstart this discussion around it, and we can then go to the others after that.
Sure, Bijou. So I think the pandemic actually threw light on this quite a bit. And I must say that while they come from a lower socioeconomic background, they are not very different from the others in terms of their tech savviness. So you will see a lot of them on social media. You will see a lot of them, having so many apps on their phones. A lot, in fact, some of them could be even better than us, So I don't see a challenge in terms of them adapting to technology. Where I see a challenge is in terms of the language. So normally we tend to use English as, the language when it comes to training, because it becomes very difficult to convert a program into multiple languages, right? So where I see a challenge is the language, not so much to do with the adaptation to technology. And I think, they're very excited that they're learning on a technology platform. And if you were to ask me during the pandemic, when we introduced the Train Circle app for all our employees in Lifestyle and Home Center, we realized that the completion rate was 100%. And probably, of course, it is also because they had a lot of time in hand. They were not really in the store. And they were very excited. They would, like what Nivedita was mentioning, they would upload videos of talking about a product, something around customer service. And there was a lot of excitement, So I don't see a challenge with adaptation to technology. Maybe from our side, what will become important is to look at how do we make it simple, make it easy for them to understand so that they can pick the learning quickly and learn from it more than anything else. So I would say it doesn't matter whether someone is a 10th standard pass or an MBA. What matters is how you've adapted to the technology and your interest in learning. I think that is the key. So if I'm interested in learning, whatever level I am in, I will definitely learn.
Sure. And Neelam and Kriti, is there something else that you all would like to add to this?
I would just add to what Nandini said that we did face initial problems when we started with, when I say initial, about 3 years back when we put our LMS, that people were a little apprehensive about using it. But Bijou, I agree with Nandini that they have WhatsApp, they see videos there, they do chatting there. I think you have to use the right platform like a notice board or something like a, which will make them interact. So play a game and win points. Right, they'll be more attracted to it. All right, if you get 1,000 points in a month, you can have a cup of tea with your hub manager. I think these small things will make them. But I think that's for everybody. That's not only for them. Getting somebody excited for learning will make them take the learning much faster is something. But I have the entire pandemic has expedited the entire thing, and not only that, I think I also believe that if you make it gamified, if you make it in their own language, completely agree, Nandini. It has to be in Marathi, it has to be, so you have to dub. That video will play 5 times. That I completely agree. They will learn. I don't see any problem in that they will not learn. And people who don't want to learn will have to be disciplined. So you will need a teacher, whether online or offline. So I don't think that's a thing to say.
And Kriti, anything?
To agree there. Yeah, Bijou, so I think kind of tend to agree there, especially for us, right? Our ground staff, I mean, being a fashion tech player, our ground staff was all already trained. I mean, they were all using Myntra apps, even for our returns and, any pickups, everything was online. So technology was never a challenge. And to Neelam's point, right, I think however we can make it interesting, we also use notice board for our ground staffs. I think it was just about how do you make it very interesting and engaging for them. One of the things I'd like to share with the group is when we started back our operations, we wanted to make sure the message reached our entire audience. All of our CXOs actually recorded their messages in a regional language. So everywhere across the country, wherever we've had our major hubs, each of our CXOs, unfortunately, we've had that diversity that we were able to pick one language, one of the major language, be it Marathi, Hindi, English, Telugu, Tamil. So we have had, we're lucky to have that representation even in our CXO board. So they all picked one language. And they recorded a lot of messages for our ground staff to be able to engage them, motivate them, and get the message out, right? And we played them. It was out on their apps. It was out in our fulfillment centers, in our warehouses, and it kind of created that energy. And anything which we sent after that, they took it with a lot of refreshment and energy, that hey, we are here to adopt, and we are here to kind of make sure that the customer is happy. So I think that really helped.
Great. One of the thoughts that we've, at least, and Lawrence is also there on the call, we've had as an association is that if the needs of the industry, and Nandini, you mentioned about this also in one of your answers, if the needs of the industry are relatively similar, of course, there will be always customization for different companies and different roles. And, some of these roles might be very unique and some of the learnings might be very unique. Is there an opportunity for, say, maybe somebody like Rai, maybe combine between Rai and Train to be able to create content instead of, inventing content from scratch, inventing learning management systems from scratch, but to be able to create content and to create a platform so that we can seamlessly transition from, say, what Rassi is doing, which is in terms of training those who are interested in retail, all the way to training people who are already involved in retail. And we can create it by different categories of employees, different levels, in languages which might be relevant to different geographies, etc. Do you think that there is merit in something like this? And maybe Lawrence, who's also on the call, can add to this in some form or the other. We do some standard things anyway, but is there something which we can actually work very closely such that we create this huge pipeline of content and then start working on it in some pay-per-use model? That's now what most people like to do, rather than invest large sums of money and create something for yourself. Say that every time I use it, I'll pay you a little bit of money. That kind of certifications and things like that. So maybe it might be useful, since all of you are responsible for this function. It might be helpful to even understand before we jump off into doing something either relevant or irrelevant to it.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I think I'll set a...
So I'll just add to this, Bijou. I think, there are some principles of retail, irrespective of, which form of retail you are in. Some basic principles are common. So for example, there is a certain service level expected in retail. There is inventory everywhere. There are certain, standards in terms of retail in a store. So these are very common across. It could be across various types of retailers too. But where there would be a differentiation would be, what is the level of service expected? So for example, in a value retail, considering the cost and everything, it's not expected, and considering the number of walk-ins, it may not be expected that, service levels are really going to be very high. Whereas if you take a premium retail or even a lifestyle retail like an M&S, there the service levels are expected to be really high, right? So the module of, let's say, an M&S vis-a-vis that of, let's say, a Max would be very different, and lifestyle for that matter, right? So we may have to look at those nuances, of course, in terms of the expectations. But basic principles could be something which could be common, and which we could definitely look at working together in putting, putting something on the RAI platform, on the Train platform, and and then of course there will be some customization, some requirement of every organization based on what they are driving as a business goal, what are their requirements, from the organization's perspective. I think that would be something that we could do.
So if I may build on, so if I may build on what Nandini said, I think it completely hits the right chord, Nandini, that, there are these nuances that are very unique to organizations. So while I think it's a fantastic idea, you need a group of people to come together and ideate what are some of the common things that ties us as an industry. We are very diverse organizations even over here, right? But some needs could be fundamental. And to throw an example, just to, kind of give you a suggestion, is we all have a certain aspiration of number of women, say, in management roles. There are certain inherent, things that women in frontline kind of deal with and tackle on a day-to-day basis. Is there an opportunity for us to create an industry level platform where we start to, create either through experience of projects, through cross-functional mentoring, cross-organization mentoring. But the point is primarily to say, can we touch a chord that connects us collectively to a community cause as well, maybe, that drives this effort? It becomes the wind beneath your wings for an initiative of this kind, because otherwise operational nuances, and to what Nandini said, the service levels are different, store standards, expectations are different, but I'm sure there are certain common things that can get us all together to collectively think about some of these aspects.
Yeah, just to add there, Bijou, I'm going to speak very different. RAI being the organization where all of us as HR head or CEOs are connected, right? But how do we create value to the, aspirational value? If I just say, if I'm an employee, I would look at the certificate saying that, oh, if I get RAI certificate, okay, I'm going to be valued in another organization, right? If that's that aspirational certificate, aspirational course, if somehow Lawrence and team can create by taking all of us are in one platform, right? RA has created that platform where everybody's connected, that yes, this is an aspirational course. Okay, if any employee, and also as a HR head, if I'm there in another, suppose Max, or Max and Spencer, she will value if one of my employee has got, best PNL. Let's say she understands the best PNL of, through RAI, and the other organization is going to value that. I'm sure the employees as well as organizations will be really happy to get into that content or that kind of courses. I know if I'm taking somebody, from, oh, he has gone through this course. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's creating a value for that certificate which an employee is going to get, and the employer thinking that, oh, this person has the capability of running a store or running a department, and I'm going to hire. That's going to really help. So you need to create that aspirational value.
Sure. So we currently have that in the case of Rasi.
Yes.
Where between, skill sets, standard definition,
yes,
and then certification, we have a link. So we say that these are the standards that we define. If you qualify for these standards, these are the skill sets which you will automatically have gathered. And if you gather these skill sets, and this is the certification that we will provide. So I know, taking your points, what you mentioned, what you're saying is that there certainly does exist an opportunity.
Yes.
All of the programs have to be worked closely in cooperation and in collaboration with you all.
Yeah.
We have to create it sector specific. So when I say sector, retail might be a larger sector, but fashion retail could be a finer sector. There could be something related to health and beauty. There could be something related to, say, pharma retail. There could be something related to grocery retail. So you have to be able to create it specific to those so that it is relevant and also completely impactful when you think of it from that industry's perspective. That's one part of it. Second part of it is that it's got to meet certain common goals and standards. And third part of it is that if it meets those common goals and standards, then there is a common certification which is linked to it, which everybody will understand and appreciate. So I think those are the three main points which have come out. Lawrence, would you like to share anything?
Yes, I would. I agree with you. If let us say we pick up a category, like let us say people in eyewear. Okay, if we pick up 6 or 7 of them, and they all come together, and we sitting with them, meaning RAI sitting with them, we are able to identify that what are the various levels of courses where the skill gaps are, and how do we create content around it, and they all certify, not only certify they also come back and share with us whatever content they have. It may be in terms of videos, or it may be in terms of the standards, and we create one common thing, so everybody in that particular circle recognizes. We begin with that, and automatically across the nations, the other people who are in eyewear join us. So this is one particular segment which probably we can take up, and we can work on it to begin with.
Sure. Thanks, Lawrence. I noticed that we have 2 audience questions, so I'll pose both of them. I'll pose the first one anyway. This is a question which says that, which is the one metric that decision makers are looking for when you pitch a virtual learning initiative to them that helps you convince them to go for it? Obviously, it is somebody who's got a virtual learning platform, and they want to understand from you all as to that one decision metric that you would apply when evaluating what they have to offer. So is anybody who would like to answer this question?
I can take this up.
Yeah, sure, Neela. Go ahead.
So I've implemented digital learning platform in 2 organizations, and most of the time questions, 2 major questions that have come is that will it have the reach, right? So which means that since most of the organization, when the organization number of people are more, that is when they are looking at a digital learning platform. When the number of people are a couple of thousands, I don't think they're looking at that platform. So the first question is, will it reach more people? Will it make? And the other question is, what about the cost benefit vis-a-vis a final trainer of it? Which means with the if a manual trainer, if a live trainer is expensive but is more effective, then they would want to go. And especially in case of customer service trainings, as you said, role plays, they're more keen on having a person do it. Where in process training, the buying comes very early because it's a stepwise thing. And so 2 things that they're looking at is that will it reach, and secondly, cost benefit analysis in terms of process training and behavioral training, or probably a manager MDP kind of a thing. But how is it matching with a trainer, live trainer there? So these are the 2
Thanks, Neelam. I'm sure you've answered that. There is a second question, which is, what are some non-financial benefits of virtual learning that give visible returns, but which cannot be measured? Non-financial benefits of virtual learning that give visible returns but cannot be measured. Okay, Nivedita, you are first on the buzzer, as they say.
I think it's a tough question. Non-financial. What is this?
What are some non-financial benefits of virtual learning that give returns, but it cannot be measured?
Okay. First thing is non-financial. You are able to reach people, which if with trainers, you can, if you have a multinational company, you are bringing standardization to your training. That's the most important thing. If it's a service training, let's say McDonald's, they have to create a burger, they have to serve. You are creating a standardization. For us, in Middle East, the way we are going to have let's say a therapeutic thing, which my therapist will do in India, same thing they will do it in Middle East if I have the same platform. That's one standardization. That's non-financial, but it's a process. Definitely you're defining a process. And second question, which you have to repeat again. So first question.
So it's basically the same, which is, kind of you answer the same thing. It cannot be measured, but it gives you an impact. It gives you a return. So exactly the McDonald's question, which is, you might train them in a process.
Absolutely.
But in the last bit of it, in terms of the final prep, the final presentation, there are things that you can't really measure it, but the ability to be able to standardize it and create access widely, I think gives it the biggest benefit.
I think that's the biggest thing is the standardization process, quality assurance, all these will come through. And another thing I wanted to add is what Neelam said. The third thing people can expect from a virtual training or LMS is the important, we are able to see our employees how much they are trained. Because the systems are actually, giving you access to measure their. So you should see when you're buying one, is it allowing you to measure their learning? If you look at it in a physical training, it's very difficult to do. And this is very fast. The speed is one thing is we are going to achieve, and we are going to measure quickly. Immediately somebody has a training on customer service, we are able to ask questions and know things much faster. I think that the third important thing you should see when you buy.
Sure.
Bijou,
So thanks, Nivedita. And sorry, Kriti, you were going to add something.
One more thing I wanted to add to what Nivedita said. One of the other non-measurable things is just the flexibility virtual learning gives to the learners. Right? I can learn at my own pace. I can learn at my own time. I have certain commitment at home. My kid has a class at that time. I can choose to take it in the night. I would have missed that in the actual setting, right? I have to be there at a certain time. So I think the flexibility it has provided people is huge. And I think it's
so basically flexibility, access, and standardization. These are three things which we have talked about, no? Okay, great. So thank you. And we are about 4 minutes past 6 o'clock. We started a few minutes late. So thank you. And without wanting to sound sexist nor patronizing Hugo, I would still like to refer to them as 6 lovely ladies who certainly contributed significantly to the deliberations of what we were, setting out to do. Virtual learning is a new area for a lot of us. We're still groping and finding our way in that journey. We probably just, at the start of it, at the initial period of where exactly this whole virtual learning journey is. But we've taken to it pretty fast, and we begin to think it's going to be part of our systems and part of our way of life for the future. And I'm sure that the audience who've been listening to us have benefited from the contributions that all of you all have been able to make today. So thank you. Thank you once again very much for the valuable time that you spent in providing us at the RAI with, sharing your insights with us at the RAI, as well as being able to kickstart hopefully a process that Lawrence will carry forward in terms of being able to, as an industry association, add value to the efforts that each one of you all are making in your organizations. Thank you once again.
Thank you.